Hello, 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 hello. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yup. Yes, sir. So this right? I'm sure this works. Probably right. I'm not sure. This is it. Hmm. Let me just put it like that. This should work. Right. I'm not sure. Should be good. Stream is working. Hopefully, it should be good. Stream is working. I mean, it's way too good. TikTok. Hopefully, it should be good. How's there an echo? Stream is working.
These are the crazy.
There's an echo for no reason. The books.
Alright friends, now we will start covering the questions from the most popular framework of Java, and that is the Spring framework. I have divided the whole Spring into three sections: the normal Spring framework, then the Spring Boot framework, and the Spring MVC. Each section will have the chapters inside it like this, and then each chapter will have the questions. First, we will cover the questions of the Spring framework. Here are the basic and very basic questions of Spring framework, and here we will cover the most important concept, and that is IOC and dependency injection. All the questions are step by step. Okay, so even if you don't know dependency injection, still when you reach the last question, you will understand all the concepts related to dependency injection and IOC. Okay, and yes, now I will mostly use the code screenshots for explaining. Okay, because coding it will take more time, and I know the interview preparation has limited time. Okay, so let's start with the first question. What is Spring Framework? What are the core features of Spring? See, we all know Java is a programming language, right? Now we can use Java together with Spring Framework to create big enterprise level applications. What is a framework? Framework is a structured platform that provides many built-in classes and functions which you can directly call and use in your large applications to develop applications fast. Okay, now the question is, there are many other frameworks, then why Java is the best? And that is because of the features provided by Spring. Now listen carefully. Here are the features. The most important one is inversion of control, then dependency injection, then Spring Container, Spring MVC, Spring Data Access ORM, simplified configuration, and real-time capabilities, etc. Okay. In the upcoming question, I will explain all of them to you one by one, so that by the end of this video or course, you will have the full understanding of each one of them with code and example. In short, if you know what Spring features are, then that means you know what is Spring. Okay, means you completely know Spring then. And here is the simplest and easy to remember definition of Spring Framework. The Spring Framework is an open source framework for building enterprise Java applications. Everything is written in this book for revision, so that before interviews you do not forget these features and answer. Now in the upcoming question, we will explore the most important feature of Spring, and that is inversion of control. What is inversion of control? What is loose coupling? This is a very, very important concept. Let me first give you a very small code example. Suppose you are creating a school management application, and there you have a math student class, inside which you have the get student count function here. Okay, now there is one client class school, inside which you have the main method, and there you are creating the object of the above math student class and then calling the function of the math student class, right? So this is a very traditional, very common approach of creating object of one class inside other class, and you already know this, right? How to call this function. Now here, this school is the dependent class because it depends on math student class function, and math student is the dependency class because it is a dependency for the bottom school class, right? Now listen carefully. This traditional approach of creating objects like this will work fine, but this is an example of tight coupling. Tight coupling means both your dependent and dependency classes are tightly coupled, meaning changes in one class will most likely require change in other class. For example, tomorrow if you want to replace this math student class with some science student class, then you have to change the code of this school class, right? Meaning your school class is tightly coupled with math student dependency class, right? But via inversion of control principle, you can design your code or classes in such a way that if I replace this math student with science student class or any other class, then there is no code change required in this school class. Okay, getting my point? That is loose coupling then. Okay, so now you will ask how to do this and what is the benefit of this? Again, pay attention. The benefit is, see, now it is only one single school class, so replacing math student class and changing the code here will have little testing impact. But when you are working on a big enterprise level application, there you will have many classes or controllers like a school class, for example, college class, university class, right? Then replacing the math student class with the science student class in every dependent class, school, college, university, will have a huge impact on testing. Okay? More the testing impact means more the chances of bugs and defects, right? So to minimize testing impact and for other benefits, we have to implement the inversion of control principle, because inversion of control will make your classes loosely coupled. In loosely coupled design, changing or replacing one service or class will have minimum impact on other class. Okay? Great. I hope now you have understand the concept of loose coupling and tight coupling also. Finally, here is the simplest definition, very easy to remember definition of IOC. Inversion of control, IOC is a design principle used for creating loosely coupled architecture. And here is a more complete definition. IOC is a design principle where the framework controls the object creation part and the dependency management, which will enhance the modularity and loose coupling in your application. Okay? In short, IOC will not create the object of dependency class like math student inside the dependent class school. Rather, you will create the object outside this school class in some container. Okay, that is inversion of control. How to implement it, that I will show you in upcoming question. But now you have the very good idea of what is IOC, why we need IOC, what is loose coupling, and the definition of loose coupling also I have written here. Loose coupling means classes or components are independent of each other, and replacing one class will have minimum impact on other. Okay, great. Always remember these concepts in Spring and everything written here in this book with example, so that you do not have to watch the whole video again and again. Okay, just a 5-6 second look of this book page and your revision will be done. How to achieve IOC? What is the difference between principle and design pattern? Remember, IOC is a principle that suggests that your classes must be loosely coupled and not dependent on each other. For example, see, here is the one dependent class and it is not tightly coupled with all these dependency classes around it. To get any service or a function from the dependency class in this dependent class, we will use the dependency injection like this. So the simple one-line explain and answer is dependency injection is a design pattern that is used to implement the inversion of control principle or to implement loose coupling. So what is the difference between principle and design? Remember, principles are fundamental ideas or ideologies that we should follow in our project. If we go against those principles, it could negatively impact our project. Okay, so example include the IOC principle, solid principle, dry principle, all these are principles. Now, one principle can be achieved in various ways and or by the design patterns. So what is design pattern? Design patterns are the specific practical way to implement those principles in your software development process. Okay, the same thing is written here also, and in the upcoming question, we will explore and focus on the implementation of dependency injection. What is dependency injection? How to implement it? Now, very important question, and I mark this question with two very important signs because this is asked almost in every interview. And today we will understand it completely. Let me first show you the diagram for the dependency injection implementation. Okay. See, normally the dependent class and dependency class are tightly coupled like this. Okay. Here we directly create the object of the dependency class in this dependent class. You already know that. Now, to replace this math student class with the science student class, we have to change the code of this school class itself, right? So this is the example without dependency injection. Okay, but when we will use dependency injection, then dependency class and dependent classes are loosely coupled and not dependent on each other like this. Here, the object of the dependency class will not be created inside a school class, but will be created and managed inside the Spring IOC container via the app.config.java file. Okay, then you have to create the student interface, which is implemented by both math student and science student classes. Okay, now listen carefully. Instead of creating the object of dependency classes in the dependent class, you will inject the instance of the student interface into the dependent class via the school class constructor like this. Now you may ask, the student interface instance will carry which instance, math student or science student? The answer is, whatever instance you will configure in this app.config, that instance will be created and received by the student interface. That's it. See, here if you want to replace the math student with science student in your school class, then change the app config for science student object creation. But you need not to change any code in the school class, right? That was the purpose, okay? To not change the school class. Just by changing the container and many classes or controller, like you do not have to change all the controller or classes. Like, see, here if you want to replace the math student with
So they are loosely coupled with client because object creation is handled externally. We can see how we need to change the school culture to change master and to science student without dependency injection. With dependency injection, we just need to change app config in the IOC container and no code change will be required in the school class. School class. Then we started like 13 p.m. This is like around 800, I give out like 80 to 90,000 a month. Max has
science student in your school class, then change the app config for science student object creation. But you need not to change any code in the school class, right? That was the purpose. Okay, to not change the school class. Just change by changing the container and many classes or controller. Like you do not have to change all the controller or classes like school class. Okay, great. That is the example and benefit of dependency injection. And one more learning we had: dependency injection implementation. You have to code for to the interface, not the implementation, the dependency classes. Okay. Also, you realize that how inversion of control principle is implemented by changing the place of object creation from the class to the container. Okay. All right. Finally, here is the simplest definition of dependency injection. Dependency injection is a design pattern that is used to implement the inversion of control principle in Java. Great. The definition diagram are here because I remember how I had a very hard time remembering and revising this dependency injection concept for my interviews. So that's why all is here. Now in the upcoming question, I will show you the code implementation. What are the must-know things before learning dependency injection in Spring? This is not an interview question or concept, but many years ago, I directly started learning dependency injection without the idea of the few basic concepts, and then it was a very hard time learning dependency injection. So I hope you know the basics of these concepts before learning DI implementation. These are very important. First, OOPS concept. Okay, inheritance, polymorphism, overriding. Second, interfaces and abstract class. Third, parameterized constructor. Fourth, this and final keywords. Fifth, fifth, Java annotations, and sixth is the IOC concept in Spring. If you have a good idea of these concepts, then you can easily understand DI implementation, which I will show you in upcoming question. How to implement dependency injection in code using Spring. Here I will implement this example which I explained previously. Now let's understand the code quickly. Okay, here is our school dependent class, and inside this is our main method. Inside this main method, normally we create objects of other classes and use their functions, right? But this time we will use the dependency injection. For that, first we will create one interface student and just declare the method inside like this. Then we will create the dependency class math student and implement the above interface and its method inside it like this. Okay, later I will explain this component annotation as well. Then we will create another class appconfig, which is called the configuration class of your Spring framework. Remember this. Now listen carefully the actual flow. First, we will use the annotation config application context, which is also called application context class, and it is provided by the Spring framework, which is used to create the IOC container context object. Remember, this context object represents your Spring IOC container. Okay. Here we have passed the appconfig file as the parameter. So what will happen? Spring will call this appconfig file and execute this component scan annotation and start scanning this class path com.example for all the components and services present inside this class path. So Spring will scan this and will register them as a bean, meaning all component inside this com.example will be registered as a bean, including the math student above math student component. Okay, I will cover bean shortly. For now, just consider bean as objects only. Now in the school class, we will inject the math student bean. For that, we will write the school class constructor code and inject the school interface instance. This student object will receive the math student object from appconfig. Because appconfig, we are returning the math student object like this, right? Then inside the constructor, we will use this keyword to set the above blank student variable to the math student object. Okay, in short, then your private student variable is now a proper student object which you can use for calling the math student class functions or methods. This in school constructor will be called. Again, pay attention.
Welcome back, aliens. My name is Davin Reddy, and let's continue the series on Spring Framework. Now, till this point, we have talked about what is Spring, we have talked about the prerequisites, and then when we talked about Spring Framework, we introduced a term that called dependency injection. But that was just a name. What exactly this concept means? In fact, in this video, we'll not just talk about dependency injection, but also IOC. Because Spring started with this concept. Of course, it has a lot of features, but then this remains the core of it. So what exactly these two terms are? So before we talk about it, the target for this video is 200 comments. Okay, so let's talk about IOC. See, when you talk about a typical application, it can be a web application or the enterprise application. See, ultimately, you want to give this application for your clients, right? So you have a client. Now, this can be a browser. This can be your mobile application, doesn't matter. And then what you want on the screen is data. So most of the application are data-driven application. You use it for the data.
देखिए अभी तक हमने इस प्लेलिस्ट में सबसे पहले देखा कि स्प्रिंग बूट की जरूरत क्या पड़ी। देन हमने क्रिएट किया स्प्रिंग बूट प्रोजेक्ट यूजिंग स्प्रिंग इनिशियलाइजर एंड इसको इंपोर्ट किया हमारे इंटेलिजे के अंदर। देन हमने देखा कि मेवन क्या होता है, मेवन की जरूरत क्या पड़ी एंड हम कैसे यूज कर सकते हैं मेवन को। देन हमने देखा कि स्प्रिंग बूट प्रोजेक्ट तो क्रिएट कर लिया है, अच्छी बात है, लेकिन उसका स्ट्रक्चर क्या है, हर एक फाइल का मीनिंग हमने देखा कि pom.xml का मतलब क्या होता है, मेवन रैपर क्या होता है, ये सब हमने देखा, अच्छी बात चली। अब हम पढ़ने जा रहे हैं एक्चुअल स्प्रिंग बूट कि स्प्रिंग बूट प्रोजेक्ट अगर हमने चलाया तो एक्चुअल में वो चला कैसे एंड हर एक एनोटेशन का मतलब क्या होता है, बीन क्या होता है, एप्लीकेशन कंटेक्स्ट क्या होता है, कंपोनेंट क्या होता है, ये सब चीजें हम इस सिंगल वीडियो में पढ़ने जा रहे हैं। ठीक है, बहुत ही ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट होने वाली है। स्टार्टिंग में फर्स्ट लेक्चर में मैंने आपसे कहा था कि आपको स्प्रिंग की नॉलेज होने की आवश्यकता नहीं है, लेकिन आपको ये वीडियो कंप्लीटली देखनी पड़ेगी, तभी चीजें क्लियर हो पाएंगी एंड वर्किंग ऑफ स्प्रिंग बूट प्रोजेक्ट आपको इसी वीडियो से पता चलेगा। ठीक है, चलिए स्टार्ट करते हैं। इस वीडियो में हम कोर कांसेप्ट्स देखेंगे स्प्रिंग बूट के। इस वीडियो के बाद आप स्प्रिंग बूट में महाशय बन जाएंगे, मक्खन की तरह आप स्प्रिंग बूट में कोड लिख पाएंगे इस वीडियो की हेल्प से। ऐसा क्यों बोल रहा हूं? क्योंकि इस वीडियो में हम कोर कांसेप्ट्स देखेंगे स्प्रिंग बूट के, चीजें एकदम क्रिस्टल क्लियर हो जाएंगी इस वीडियो के बाद। ठीक है, जब भी आप कोई भी कोड देखेंगे स्प्रिंग बूट का, तुरंत आप समझ जाएंगे कि भाई किस लाइन का क्या मतलब है और बिहाइंड द सीन क्या हो रहा है। ठीक है, चलिए स्टार्ट करते हैं वीडियो को। मान लीजिए आप, ठीक है, आप अभी तक क्या करते थे, मान लीजिए आपको जावा के अंदर कार नाम की क्लास है, उसका एक इंस्टेंस बनाना है, उसका एक ऑब्जेक्ट बनाना है, तो आप क्या करते थे, कार इज इक्वल टू न्यू कार। ठीक है, कोई दिक्कत वाली बात नहीं है। यहाँ पर हम क्रिएट कर रहे हैं, फिर से बोल रहा हूं मैं, यहाँ पर ऑब्जेक्ट को हम क्रिएट कर रहे हैं अपने हाथों से, लेकिन स्प्रिंग ऐसी फंक्शनैलिटी प्रोवाइड करता है कि हम स्प्रिंग को बोल सकते हैं कि लाइए भाई ऑब्जेक्ट बनाकर लाकर दो। ठीक है, तो अब हम स्प्रिंग से बोल सकते हैं कि ऑब्जेक्ट लाकर दो और स्प्रिंग जो है वो लाकर दे देगा। ठीक है, यानी कि ऑब्जेक्ट के क्रिएशन को हम एक्सटर्नलाइज कर रहे हैं। क्या कर रहे हैं? एक्सटर्नलाइज कर रहे हैं। पहले हम खुद क्रिएट कर रहे थे ऑब्जेक्ट को, अब किसी और से करा रहे हैं, यानी कंट्रोल को हमने पलट दिया है। हेंस द नेम इन्वर्जन ऑफ कंट्रोल। अगर आपने सुना हो ये वर्ड IOC, इन्वर्जन ऑफ कंट्रोल, ये टर्म है स्प्रिंग में, स्प्रिंग बूट में। इसका मतलब ये है, इसका मतलब है कि जो बंदा है ये खुद क्रिएट नहीं करेगा ऑब्जेक्ट को, जैसे हम करते थे कार C इक्वल टू न्यू कार करके। अब ये बंदा IOC कंटेनर के पास जाएगा, IOC कंटेनर के पास जाएगा, कहने का मतलब है स्प्रिंग के पास जाएगा और स्प्रिंग हमें ऑब्जेक्ट लाकर दे देगा, या फिर IOC कंटेनर हमें ऑब्जेक्ट लाकर दे देगा। ठीक है, फिर से बोल रहा हूं मैं कि अब हम खुद ऑब्जेक्ट नहीं क्रिएट करेंगे, अब स्प्रिंग से बोलेंगे। अब स्प्रिंग में ऐसा खास क्या है? स्प्रिंग प्रोवाइड करता है IOC कंटेनर, IOC कंटेनर, IOC बोले तो इन्वर्जन ऑफ कंट्रोल। ये क्या है? एक बक्सा है। ठीक है, क्या है? बक्सा, जिसमें बहुत सारे आपके प्रोजेक्ट में जितनी भी क्लास बनी हुई है, ठीक है, उनको अपने पास रख लेता है IOC कंटेनर। ठीक है, अपने पास रख लेगा सबको, और जोन से भी आपको चाहिए वो आप मांग लेंगे और ये दे देगा। ठीक है, फिर से बोल रहा हूं मैं कि अब आप खुद क्रिएट नहीं करेंगे ऑब्जेक्ट, स्प्रिंग से मांगेंगे। ठीक है, स्प्रिंग दे देगा आपको। स्प्रिंग में ऐसा खास क्या है? IOC कंटेनर है। IOC कंटेनर मतलब एक कंटेनर जहां पर बहुत सारे ऑब्जेक्ट्स पड़े होते हैं, कि सारे ऑब्जेक्ट्स पड़े होते हैं। IOC बोले तो इन्वर्जन ऑफ कंट्रोल, जो मैंने आपको बताया अभी। कंट्रोल जो है वो पलट गया है, आप खुद क्रिएट नहीं कर रहे हैं, किसी और से करवा रहे हैं। कंट्रोल जो है वो पलट गया है, किसी और के पास आ गया कंट्रोल ऑब्जेक्ट को क्रिएट करने का। ठीक है, तो कोई बोलता है भाई कल को आप रिक्शा में जा रहे हो और रिक्शा वाले ने पूछ लिया आपसे, भाई बताओ IOC कंटेनर क्या होता है? तो आपको बोला देखो बता दे रहा हूं मैं, फिर से पूछना, टाइम बर्बाद मत करो। IOC कंटेनर जो एक बक्सा है जिसमें सारे ऑब्जेक्ट्स पड़े हुए होते हैं। ठीक है, और फिर जब मुझे चाहिए होता है मैं उसे मांग लेता हूं, मैं खुद क्रिएट नहीं करता। और ध्यान सुनना, ये IOC कंटेनर किसका पार्ट है? स्प्रिंग का पार्ट है, स्प्रिंग बूट का पार्ट है। ठीक है भाई, लेकिन जो रिक्शा वाला है वो चतुर है, उसने पूछा भाई IOC कंटेनर चाहिए होता है, फिर एप्लीकेशन कंटेक्स्ट क्या होता है? तो आपको बोला देख भाई तू चतुर तो है, लेकिन मेरे को पता है एप्लीकेशन कंटेक्स्ट इज अ वे टू इंप्लीमेंट IOC कंटेनर। समझ रहे हो? IOC कंटेनर को अचीव करते हो किससे? एप्लीकेशन कंटेक्स्ट से। तो हम इन टर्म्स को इंटरचेंजेबली यूज कर सकते हैं। ठीक है, एप्लीकेशन कंटेक्स्ट एक तरीका है टू अचीव IOC कंटेनर। ठीक है, एप्लीकेशन पार्ट ऑब्जेक्ट को हम क्रिएट कर रहे हैं अपने हाथों से, लेकिन स्प्रिंग ऐसी फंक्शनैलिटी प्रोवाइड करता है कि हम स्प्रिंग को बोल सकते हैं कि लाइए भाई ऑब्जेक्ट बनाकर लाकर दो। ठीक है, तो अब हम स्प्रिंग से